When I began writing what would later be called the Red Book, I did not do so with the intention of becoming a spiritual leader or a psychological revolutionary. I wrote it because something inside me refused to stay buried any longer. Not a thought, not an emotion, something deeper, something unseen yet overwhelmingly alive. I sensed it first like a faint vibration beneath my ordinary thoughts, the way you sense a storm long before it reaches your window. And I know you've felt it too, that unexplainable weight inside your chest, that silent tug in your mind, the feeling that something within you wants to speak, but you've spent years pretending you can't hear it. For most of my life, I believed I understood myself. I was a respected psychiatrist, admired, successful, surrounded by colleagues and students who treated my words as authority. Yet beneath the polished surface of that life was a truth I had refused to face. I was living only from the outer layer of my being, the part shaped by expectation, logic, identity, and societal approval. I had mastered the art of appearing complete while secretly starving internally. It is an uncomfortable thing to admit, especially as a man of science, but the truth does not care about your reputation. I felt a growing emptiness inside me, a vast, echoing hollow that no achievement could fill. The more I ignored it, the louder it became, not through words, but through disturbances in my inner world. Sleep felt thin and brittle. My thoughts no longer obeyed me. My emotions changed like unpredictable weather. It felt as if something ancient had opened its eyes in the darkness of my unconscious. That is where the visions began. Most people hear the word vision and imagine delusion or madness. But listen carefully. Madness is when you run from what is inside you. Wisdom is when you turn toward it. What I saw during those nights was not insanity. It was communication, a dialogue from the depths of the psyche that modern society teaches humans to ignore. There were images of deserts soaked in red light, serpents rising from the shadows, ancient figures with faces I could not describe, speaking in tones older than language itself. Cities crumbling under silent skies, oceans swallowing structures and returning them in new forms. I could have dismissed them. I could have clung to logic and told myself nothing unusual was happening. I could have armed myself with rationality, like every frightened mind does. But ignoring the unseen does not protect you. It only gives it power over you. And I had lived far too long as a prisoner of my own surface personality. Every human being has a facade they present to the world. The confident one, the responsible one, the polite one, the strong one. But that facade is only the mask your consciousness wears. Beneath it lies the entire weight of your forgotten self. That is the unseen, and it does not disappear simply because you pretend it isn't there. The Red Book is nothing but my attempt to face that unseen directly. I remember the moment I finally surrendered to it. I sat quietly in my study, the lamp burning low, and I allowed the images to come without resistance. And for the first time, I realized something life-altering. The psyche is not a small internal space. It is a universe, a living world. And every fear, desire, memory, wound, and unspoken dream you carry exists somewhere inside it, shaping you from within. You believe your life is controlled by your choices and circumstances, but much of your suffering comes from what you refuse to confront within yourself. You think your anxiety comes from pressure. Your loneliness comes from others abandoning you. Your pain comes from your past. Your confusion comes from loving the wrong people. But those are only symptoms. The real cause lies in the unseen realms of your own mind. Everything you avoid silently accumulates there. Every emotion you suppress sinks there. Every memory you deny is stored there. and one day, when the weight becomes too heavy, it rises. It pushes through your dreams, your moods, your thoughts, and even your relationships. It disturbs your peace, not because it wants to punish you, but because it wants to be recognized. That is the deepest truth I learned while writing the Red Book. Humans are not destroyed by what they see. They are destroyed by what they refuse to see within themselves. The unseen inside you already knows who you are. It remembers the promises you broke to yourself. It knows the love you wanted but never received. It knows the anger you swallowed because you were told to be good. It knows the part of you that feels small, unworthy, unnoticed. It knows why you keep choosing the same pain in different forms, and it waits patiently until you finally stop running. When I began exploring my inner world, I felt fear, confusion, even shame. How could a man as educated and rational as I was feel overtaken by symbolic visions? But the deeper I went, the clearer it became. The unseen is not chaos. It is structure. It is intelligence. It is the part of the psyche that refuses to let your real self die quietly beneath your performance of being fine. You must understand something important here. The unseen is not your enemy. It is your beginning. It is where your truth sleeps. And truth always wakes anyways. As I wrote page after page, I realized I was not descending into madness. I was descending into meaning, into forgotten memories, into drives and impulses that had shaped my behavior for years without my knowledge, into the symbolic language of my own soul. And the more I wrote, the more I understood why so many people feel lost or anxious without knowing why. They have become strangers to their own depths. You feel this too, don't you? That strange tension inside you. The sense that something invisible is shaping your emotions and your choices. The feeling that you are not fully living, not fully expressing, not fully becoming. That is the unseen trying to reach you. And if you ignore it long enough, it will erupt through your life in ways you can no longer control. My Red Book journey began when I surrendered to that eruption, when I allowed myself to meet the parts of me that were unfamiliar, irrational, symbolic, emotional, chaotic, divine, and terrifying. And as I walked deeper, one truth echoed louder than everything else. The unseen inside you is the key to becoming whole. You are not meant to remain on the surface of your own life. You are meant to descend, to confront, to understand, to evolve. The journey into the unseen is not pleasant. It demands honesty. It demands letting go of who you pretend to be. It demands facing impulses you thought were wrong, desires you thought were shameful, fears you thought were weak, and memories you locked away long before you understood their impact. But once you begin this descent, something extraordinary happens. You stop being controlled by your unconscious, and you start transforming with it. That is why I wrote the Red Book. Not for scholars, not for admiration, not for legacy. I wrote it for the person who feels haunted by something they cannot name, for the one who senses invisible forces inside them, fear, desire, pain, intuition, longing, and finally wants to understand why their inner world feels so heavy and so alive at the same time. You came here because the unseen inside you is already awake. It is already calling you. And now we begin the descent together. I must tell you something that no theory, no lecture, and no textbook ever prepared me for. When I stepped into the unseen depths of my own psyche, I expected clarity. I expected answers. I expected wisdom waiting like a patient teacher. But what I found first was resistance. Not from the world, not from other people, but from within myself. Every human being carries a silent guardian in the mind, a gatekeeper, a protector, the part of you that insists, don't go there, don't open that door, don't question this feeling, don't disturb what you've buried. Most people mistake this inner resistance for fear or anxiety, but it is far deeper than those emotions. It is the unconscious trying to protect you from truths you once believed you were too fragile to face. When my visions began to intensify, I felt this resistance like a physical force. Some nights, as I wrote the earliest passages of the Red Book, my hand trembled, not because of supernatural fear, but because a part of me knew that once I crossed a certain threshold, I could never return to the version of myself that the world praised. I would lose the Jung they admired. I would lose the certainty I had built around myself. And perhaps most frightening of all, I would lose the illusions I had used to survive. You know this feeling too, even if you have never named it. That inner hesitation you feel when you get too close to your real fears. The discomfort when you suddenly question your relationships. The tightness in your chest when you sense you have been repeating the same emotional wounds for years. The denial that rises when your mind whispers, the problem is not out there, it is in here. That is the threshold of the unseen. Crossing it changes everything. In the beginning, I fought it. I tried to restore order through analysis. I tried to rationalize the symbols, categorize the visions, interpret them with the tools I had spent years mastering. But the unconscious does not obey the language of logic. It speaks in images. It speaks in emotion. It speaks in symbols older than civilization itself. I realized then that the unseen within us is not chaotic, it is ancient, and the ancient does not negotiate with the modern masks you wear. The first figure I encountered in my inner descent was not a comforting guide, but a terrifying presence, a figure that seemed to embody everything I had repressed: anger, hunger, desire, ambition, impulses I had buried to appear civilized. It stood before me like a shadow given form, and as I wrote down its words, I felt something inside me crack. I had spent years believing I was in control of myself. But the truth was, I had only been in control of the part of me that lived on the surface. The rest of me, my depth, my instinct, my raw nature, had been living without my awareness. Every human carries such a figure, a shadow self, a guardian of everything we have disowned in order to be accepted. And although the world tells you to suppress it, the shadow does not disappear. It watches, it waits, it influences your choices when you're tired. It speaks through your anger when you feel cornered. It sabotages your relationships when old wounds are touched. It pushes you to chase desires that you yourself do not fully understand. The unseen is not mystical nonsense. It is psychology in its purest form. The part of you that still remembers the tools you abandoned. As I confronted my shadow, I realized something deeply unsettling. It was not my enemy. It was the part of me I had never allowed to live. The part of me society had forced into silence. The part that held my creativity, my passion, my raw intensity, and even my desires. And once I stopped running from it, I heard the truth it had been trying to tell me. A person becomes dangerous only when they divide themselves. When one part of them is forced into the light and the other is forced into darkness. This division breeds inner conflict. Conflict breeds anxiety. Anxiety breeds confusion. Confusion breeds suffering. Not because the unseen is dangerous, but because you've been living with half a psyche. The Red Book was my attempt to repair this division, to bring the unseen into the seen, to make peace with the parts of myself I had feared. But to do this, I had to walk deeper, far deeper than simple self-reflection. I had to enter the symbolic world of the unconscious, where the language of the soul expresses itself through visions, myth, stories, and archetypes. One night, I found myself standing before a vast red desert. It stretched endlessly, the sky above burning like a furnace. The sand beneath my feet felt alive, shifting as if breathing. In the distance, a tower rose out of the heat, ancient and crumbling. I knew instinctively that the tower was myself, my identity, my ego, my carefully constructed world, and it was breaking, not being destroyed, but shedding what was false. Your psyche does this too. Every time your life feels like it's falling apart, something in your inner world is shedding its skin, not to punish you, but to free you. Human beings cling desperately to outdated versions of themselves, out of fear, out of habit, out of a need for predictability. But the unseen does not care about predictability. It cares about authenticity, and authenticity demands the destruction of who you were so you can become who you truly are. In that red desert, I finally understood why so many people feel trapped in their own minds. They are standing in a collapsing tower, screaming for stability, unaware that collapsing is the very thing that will save them. The tower must fall. The false identity must crack. The illusions must shatter. Only then does the unseen reveal its true purpose, transformation. As I continued my descent, I realized something else, something far more important than any concept I had studied. The unconscious does not simply contain your fears and memories. It contains your future, your potential, the parts of you that have not been born yet, the strengths you do not know you possess, the wisdom you have not yet grown into. People assume the unseen is dark, but the unseen also holds your light, your intuition, your creativity, your instinct, your truths, your deeper purpose, the self that you are becoming. Most people never meet this future self because they stay trapped in who they used to be. The Red Book became my pathway to that future self. And as I walked deeper, I learned that the unseen is not a place you visit once. It is a living landscape within you, a world that changes as you change, a world that holds the core of your being. If you want peace, you must enter it. If you want clarity, you must listen to it. If you want transformation, you must surrender to it. Not with fear, not with resistance, but with courage. Because the unseen is not here to break you, it is here to rebuild you. And now that you have stepped into this journey with me, the deeper layers of your psyche are already awakening. The descent continues. There comes a moment in every inner journey when you stop asking what is happening to me, and you begin to ask what is awakening within me. That moment arrived for me after months of confronting visions, symbols, dreams, voices, and images that defied logic, but spoke directly to something older than logic, something ancient within the human soul. As I wrote the final pages of what would become the Red Book, I realized that the greatest illusion a person carries is the belief that they fully know themselves. No one truly knows themselves, not until they meet the parts of their psyche that have been exiled, silenced, ignored, or forgotten. Not until they face the inner figures that speak truths they don't want to hear. Not until they stand before the vast, untouched landscape of their unconscious and finally understand you are far more than the life you have been living. This is the hidden purpose of the unseen. It is not a darkness that exists to frighten you. It is a depth that exists to complete you. Your surface mind, the part of you that thinks, plans, argues, compares, doubts, knows only a fraction of who you are. The unseen carries the rest, and when you begin listening to it, your life undergoes an irreversible shift. In the final stages of my descent, I found myself walking through an inner landscape that felt both familiar and foreign. A forest with no horizon, a river with no source, a sky lit by no sun. Everything existed without explanation, and yet everything made sense, emotionally, instinctively, symbolically. The unconscious does not speak in facts, it speaks in meaning. And as I moved through that inner world, I encountered figures who represented the deepest truths I had refused to live. One spoke of courage, the courage to be honest with yourself, even when honesty tears apart the identity you've built. Another spoke of desire, not the shallow, momentary cravings of daily life, but the deep longing of the soul for fulfillment, expression, passion, and purpose. Another spoke of fear, the silent force that shapes your life more than any external enemy ever could. Fear is a clever architect. It builds your habits. It shapes your relationships. It chooses your silence. It hides your truth. It determines what you think you're worthy of. When I finally faced the true form of my fear, not as an abstract idea, but as an inner figure, it said something I will never forget. You did not become who you are because you were courageous. You became who you are because you were afraid of who you might become. Those words shattered me because they were true. I had spent years shaping myself into a respectable man, a logical man, a scientific man, a man admired by peers and students. But beneath all that structure, I had buried the parts of myself that were wild, instinctual, creative, spiritual, and deeply emotional. Fear had not just kept me safe, it had kept me small. And fear has done the same to you. You know it. You've felt it. You've lived it. Fear has shaped the relationships you stayed in. Fear has shaped the dreams you abandoned. Fear has shaped the truths you swallowed. Fear has shaped the choices you made to avoid upsetting others. Fear has shaped the version of yourself you present to the world. And the unseen within you watches all of this silently, patiently, waiting for the moment when you are finally ready to stop living as a fraction of yourself. When I accepted this truth, something shifted inside me. A breaking, a collapsing, a surrender. Not surrender to weakness, but surrender to depth, to honesty, to wholeness. My visions softened. My inner world began to reorganize itself. Symbols that once terrified me revealed themselves as pathways. Figures that once confronted me now guided me. The unconscious does not attack you, it only mirrors you. And when you stop fighting your truth, the reflection becomes clearer. One night, I found myself standing before a great book in my vision, a massive volume bound in red leather, pulsing like a heart. I knew instantly what it represented, the chronicle of my inner world, the record of my descent, the living testament of everything I had faced within myself. And as I opened it, I saw not words, but images. Images of my fears, my desires, my shadows, my instincts, my wounds, my strengths, my future, my soul. All of it preserved, all of it alive. That is when I understood the ultimate purpose of the Red Book. It was not created to guide others. It was created to save me from myself. If this journey spoke to you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, subscribe, and share this with someone who is also searching for their deeper self. Your support helps Psychatic continue exploring the unseen depths of the human soul.